there's a field of family constellations, systemic family constellations, different names for it, begun by a man named Bert Hellinger, who was German. He died just a few years ago in his 90s. Really amazing visionary and healer who developed this model based on systemic principles. So he was a German psychotherapist, also a minister who lived in South Africa with a Zulu, really deeply attuning to that indigenous collective way of life. So he brings all these different, a really German sense of order. There's a beautiful kind of structure to it, plus also this very relational thing. And so family constellations are based on the idea that you constellate a family system, and a dynamic that's happening in one place in the system, in one person, will be related to some other part. So there'll be some kind of loyalty or entanglement, maybe 2 or 3 generations up the line, where what's happening, a struggle that one person's having here, is related to something up the line. So you constellate these family systems and unwind this entanglement, and people find relief. And there's a huge and really robust field in this all around the world. There's less in North America. In Europe and South America, it's much more vibrant than it is here. But family systems constellations, this amazing practice. And so out of that, there have been sort of subsets that have come out. Nature constellations is one, where instead of constellating a family system, you constellate a natural system. So a river is flooding in the dam, and the people who are building the dam and the people who don't want to build the dam, and the birds and the fish and the clouds, right? That's a natural system around an issue. And so you can constellate that. People also do organizational constellations, where you're not constellating a family system, you're constellating a system in an organization, in a business, in a nonprofit. And there are lots of other versions that people have kind of pulled through and out of family constellation systems. And so these Across the Veil constellations fit in there. They're a version related to, but not exactly. And I would say what these are structural constellations. That's how we describe them. And so we're not constellating a family system, we're constellating an archetypal pattern. So we bring in the village of the living, the village of the ancestors, the river, the spirit beings who help guide us across. Those are the aspects of that system. So we don't go back in the generational lines, and we're not diving into really complex generational trauma the way family systems constellations do. It's not about representing your deeply wounded ancestors. So there'll be trauma, but they're kind of small t trauma generally. It's not as, it's just not as deep into those as family systems are. So the foundation of constellations is this systemic rather than individual approach. You know, I've heard Hellinger has described it like a mobile. If you tug on this part moves, right? That we are all connected. Or of course that image that, you know, if you look at your hand like this, you see 4 different, there you go, like that. Those fingers look separate, but of course those fingers are connected. And constellations, the stars are in constellations. The constellations are ways of recognizing patterns between seemingly separate objects. So we seem like we're different, like we're separate because we're in these separate bodies, but in fact, we're part of a larger system, and there are larger patterns that flow through us. So they're about that systemic perspective, and also about understanding and respecting the foundational patterns and flow of energy. So Hellinger would call those the orders of love, right? There's some foundational archetypal structures that allow energy to flow. And so Across the Veil constellations take a different set of structures, some of Hellinger's too, but say these are what allow energy to flow. So it's really an evolving process. I've been doing this off and on I probably did the first one 8 years ago, and have been versions of it ever since. And it now feels right after COVID to start to move it forward. And related to some of the earlier things I talked about, now that the principles and the practices are starting to be present, it's like, okay, now there's a place for the stance. So it really feels like something that's coming through, and that I'm excited to be bringing or making space for, but we do it all together. I can't do them alone. So when people show up, it's exciting. It has a kind of exploratory, like, okay, what can we learn in this?